High Point University presents A Conversation with Scott McKain and Nito Cobain is a production of UNC TV in association with High Point University.
Hello, I'm Nito Cobain, president of High Point University. Welcome to this program. Today, I have a phenomenal guest, a person I've known for a long time, a man who knows what he's talking about from experience, a person who understands what it takes to run a good business, and more importantly, to make it distinctive. An author whose books have been known across the world. In fact, his latest book has been on the best-selling list, one of the top 10 business books in Forbes magazine and Forbes.com. I'm delighted to have him on the campus of High Point University, and I can't wait to get into some of these questions with him. His name is Scott McKain. He hails from Las Vegas, Nevada, but he travels the world. Scott, welcome to the campus of High Point University.
Nito, it's great to be back on campus and great to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
You know, I want right away to get into the heart of what you have invested your lifetime in doing, which, as I understand it, you have invested your time, your energy, your effort, your resources in deciphering what it takes for an organization, for-profit, non-profit, small, large, in the United States, across the world, small number of employees, a large number of employees, what it takes to make that institution distinctive and therefore sustainable and therefore extraordinarily successful. What is that?
Well, I think it gets to one particular thing, Nito, and that is our differences. So many organizations today view what they do through the lens of what our competitors within our respective industry are doing. The drive is to be more like them so that we can compete with them, when in fact people choose us because of our differences. No customer in recorded history has ever said, I love them, they're exactly like everybody else. They say they love them because of something that they do. I mean, I would not have said to my wife, Tammy, I want to marry you because you're exactly like every other woman I've dated.
Yes,
yes.
I
mean, we choose based upon the differences. And so through the research, we found that there were basically 4 cornerstones of distinction that enabled either organizations or individuals could apply the process as well to help them stand out and be recognized as distinctive in their
Do you use the word differences and the word distinction synonymously?
No. If I slap every customer in the face, I am different. But it doesn't mean that they will come back.
Doesn't mean it's better.
Exactly right. Different is not better. Different is merely different. And so what we have to do is to find those areas that really have traction for customers, or make us the kind of organization that attracts the employees that we desire for the future. And I find that so few leaders and so few organizations have the level of clarity that's really required to make the decisions that will end up generating a distinctive organization.
So you've written in your books that that there are 4 primary areas of distinction.
Cornerstones. The first one is clarity.
Clarity.
Right. In other words, you have to be so precise about what you are. You've planted your flag in the ground. This is who we are. An example that I use in the book is for one of his Domino's Pizza. Domino's decided our strength is going to be delivery. So in this world of competition in that particular industry, being the fastest, they used to say your pizza in 30 minutes. They haven't used that since the 90s, but that's still how we think of them. But another little pizza place that we used to go to when I was a kid, the guy said, better ingredients, better pizza. And that was the very first Papa John's. And even though the founder has certainly had his share of difficulty brought on by his own behavior, we know that their flag in the ground is quality pizza. So they both compete in the same marketplace, yet they differentiate themselves from another by the focus, by the clarity. One says our pizza is going to be the best, the other says our pizza is going to be the fastest. So one of the challenges with clarity is that you also have to be just as precise about what you're not. And that is the problem for many leaders and for many organizations. They want to say, oh, we're this too, or we're this and that's one of the challenges that we have as customers is when you try to be everything, how do you stand out? People aren't loyal to a generic. There has to be some focal point that's your flag in the ground, and this is who we are, and this is what we stand for.
So Scott, when you say clarity, You're talking about, for example, in your own life or my own life, we have to have a clear vision of who we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there and all that. But clarity without concentrated communication and connection
Yes.
is to naught.
Exactly. Right. Which leads into the second and third points of distinction, and the second one is creativity. Now, frankly, that's the one that surprised me when I started researching this. You know, everybody goes into this with their own assumptions. You know, you're interested in the topic, you have your assumptions about the topic, or else it wouldn't be where you're spending your time researching. I assume clarity would be, creativity would be the first thing, right? Let's get creative. Let's think outside the box. That'll make us stand out. Not true. I think part of the reason that we always say think outside the box is because we haven't defined the box to begin with. So I went to Nashville and I talked to songwriters, interviewed about 20 different songwriters, because their job is dependent upon constant creativity. If I don't keep writing new songs, I don't get paid. So without exception, they all said you have to be clear first and then you get creative. In other words, is this going to be a rock song or a country song? Sung by a male, a female, or a group? I have to be very precise. That's what I encourage organizations and leaders to do. Begin with clarity, then within that confines of what you've created. Now, how are you going to do it just a little bit differently than the competition?
Well, what happens when you have precise clarity? You use the example of Domino's. I happen to be very good friends with the CFO of Domino's. I understand. What happens when somebody else comes in and moves you off your center point? Somebody else comes up with a more clever, faster, cheaper, better idea. Does it matter, therefore, that you have clarity? At that point, you're mispositioned, you're depositioned?
I'll give you a definite maybe on that. But here's two reasons why. Number one is it gets back to the Clayton Christensen study on the innovator's dilemma. You just can't put your flag in the ground and say we're going to be fast and then stop innovating. You've got to continue to accelerate your performance and promise, which is part of what the new book Iconic is about. So if that's where your flag is in the ground, then by nature you should be the one most likely to innovate in that particular area to advance your point that is your clarity. If not, then you haven't done your job. But the second thing is, if your clarity is so well established, right, then when other competitors come in and say, oh, we do that too, they are perceived as imitators. And that's why it's so important to be that precise. A quick example on the creativity thing that ties these two together. Taylor family starting a little rental car business in St. Louis, no variation in product, right? The Ford I get from Avis is the same as the Ford I get from Hertz. They said, let's innovate at one particular point. How does the customer access the product? And that was the genesis of Enterprise Rental Car, of course. So it's not that they changed the product, it's that they were very clear, we're going to be a rental car agency, easy to deal with, you know, committed to our employees. But the one little creative twist that we can bring is, let's take the car to them. One of the things I encourage in terms of innovation and creativity is to think about how other companies in other industries would do this. Really what Jeff Bezos did with Amazon is say, wait a minute, Enterprise is bringing the car to the customer. Why does the customer have to go to the bookstore to get the book? And then how do we build, you know, upon that? I met a dentist recently in Austin, Texas, and he put the dental office in a trailer, and they bring the dentist to you. So all of these ways that we can be creative by taking a look at how, you know, how would Starbucks run your business? How would Apple run an organization? Not that we want to imitate what they're doing, but it's a source of creative thinking that can make a difference.
What's the third one?
Communication.
Clarity, creativity.
And then it's communication. Part of the challenge that we face in the real world now is that there are so many ways to communicate. It's grown exponentially because of social media, because of the internet and technology, which means there's a lot of ways to get it wrong. One of the things that I've found in the research that distinctive organizations are doing is they're going to their customers and they're saying, how would you like us to communicate with you? If you want a letter, we'll do it by mail. If you want a phone call, we call you. If you want a text, we text you. We let you define the method of communication that that you use and is most advantageous to you. But the
banks have done that.
Absolutely, yeah, great example. And the airlines, you know, your flight, welcome. You know, I'm flying here. Get a text from Delta, welcome to Greensboro. Your bags will be at this. You know, all of that helps the customer. But all that's happening right now in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of big data, in terms of all these technological advances that we're hearing, emphasizes that story has never been more important for organizations and for individuals. It's the only thing that transverses all of the generations that are now in the workforce. It doesn't matter if you're a millennial or a baby boomer, we all love a great story. So what we have to be organizationally and individually are great narrators. Tell a great story.
So by story you mean to illustrate the points thereof, why you have, what is your clarity and how you're creative and so on.
Exactly. I can tell you how many customers we are serving, but if I tell you the story of a customer that we served, now all of a sudden the mind remembers that.
Sure.
We've engaged you not only intellectually but emotionally. Data doesn't engage us emotionally.
Yes.
Not that we shouldn't use that.
Yes.
I'm not denigrating that, but we have to use both forms.
Yeah, I mean, I was last night I was reading the next edition of the HPU University magazine, which is from cover to cover is filled with stories.
Yes.
What is happening in the lives of these students? What is happening in the lives of their alumni? What is happening in the lives of their parents who celebrate their children's success? Everything you said so far, you're describing High Point University to a T, but we'll come back to that. What's the fourth one? The first one was clarity, second one was creativity, third one was communication, and the fourth one?
It's called customer experience focus. Now, the wording there is very intentional because we hear so many leaders say, oh, we have a customer focus, or we listen to the voice of the customer, or the one that drives me crazy. We exceed customer expectations, because then I'll often ask, well, what does your customer expect?
Yes.
And they can't define that, or they're not precise. We think that they, it's how do we make them feel? And we're talking about internal as well as external customers here in terms of developing the culture inside any organization. What is the experience? I grew up in a rural town in southern Indiana, and several years ago they asked me to come back and speak to the teachers in my little hometown rural school. I was terrified because at that time my third grade teacher was still teaching. Right? I don't care how old you get. You stand up, your third grade teacher's in the audience. You're a third grader all over again.
Besides, they know so much about you.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
You really got to worry about that, right? So I had prepared my opening because I was so nervous to stand up in front of the teachers, and I was going to ask, what is the single biggest problem in education? Not that I knew the answer, but it would facilitate discussion, which would help me with my nervousness and get them involved. And my third grade teacher said, Sesame Street. I didn't know how to respond. She said, well, Scott, who taught you the alphabet? And of course I said, well, my grandmother and my mother were the wonderful women who taught me my ABCs. She said, for the last 40 years, young people have learned their ABCs from Big Bird and Bert and Ernie. They arrive the first day of formal education expecting an experience as they're educated. And I thought, my third grade teacher is still teaching me, right? Why would we presume that a generation that has grown up learning experientially will now go into the world of work and not be concerned about the employee experience, or would not be concerned about how they feel as a customer? And so what we have to understand is it is incumbent upon us, if we, businesses grow through obtaining and retaining customers profitably. So how do we obtain them? We have an experience that people want to talk about. How do we retain them? We create experiences that they want to repeat. And by doing that in a profitable manner, we create successful businesses. And it's fascinating to me. I've spoken at several schools of business, Kellogg School of Business, at UCLA, at Northwestern, at Indiana University. And it's fascinating to me, in some schools, it is possible to get your MBA and never have taken a single course on the customer experience. When for many organizations, that is going to determine their success or failure in the marketplace.
I can't agree with you more. I mean, High Point University is a premier life skills school. And what we mean by that in so many words is everything you've just said. that it's very important that you go to college and that you learn all the academic content. But if you don't put it in context of how you're going to live and where you're going to live and how you're going to earn a living, then the application of that content is going to be out of context. Yep. So at High Point, we say we want to live, they watch, they see us modeling the behaviors, certainly understanding how to sell your ideas. Every student at High Point University goes through a sales process where they're videotaped, where they go back and see, are they persuasive, are they communicating with clarity? And this is unique for higher education. This is not as common as people think, in part because traditionally organizations, business, organizations, institutions of higher learning, have not been embedded in that area. They've been embedded in research, in the development of knowledge, and the delivery of knowledge was in the on the platform of a classroom, for example, or a project, or writing a paper. But now we're saying that's not enough. We've done extensive research, Scott, at High Point University. You'll be interested in this research where we've taken 500 C-suite executives across the country and asked them a series of questions. This is empirical data. This is not anecdotal data. And we said, what are you looking for in these students? And then we became more precise. We said, between this and this, which one is more important? Between that and that, which one is? And we came up with conclusions that said that the marketplace globally as it is today is expecting graduates from college to know these things, just what you're talking about. And you're not going to get those things unless you've been through the journey of experiential learning, which means internships, undergraduate research, listening to people like you, having all of these CEO parents that we bring to High Point to speak to our students. It's going to seminars, it's being exposed to the world. Those are the kinds of things today that if we don't have, we're not going to produce the employees you're talking about. You're talking about what is happening inside of an organization. But who's feeding the inside of this organization? Universities are.
It certainly are.
Right? So it all begins with education. That's why what you're talking about is so important. That's why we're so excited that you're here for 2 days. You're speaking to our students, and they're getting to know you. And that's why you're a corporate executive in residence, bringing forth all these experiences you've seen around the world, all this research you've done for your books, and all this dialogue you've had with executives, and making it real for our students. This is what's expected of you, to be differentiated and to be distinctive.
Years ago, I heard a very, very wise man say, and in fact, I think it was you, say...
I've gotten wiser since then, Scott. Good.
Well, I clearly remember sitting in an audience where you were speaking, and you said, knowledge is power is a lie.
Yes.
It is the application of knowledge.
Yes.
And that was an aha for me, not only because of what you were saying about the application, but where do people go? I know where people go to gain knowledge, but where do we go to gain application skills? And that's what my clients are telling me is often missing from the product of the universities that are the new employees, is they have the knowledge, they don't have the ability to apply that knowledge in a meaningful way that benefits the employer, most importantly, that benefits the customer. And that's a fundamental revolution that has to happen. Because as we see what's happening in artificial intelligence, where we're hearing about what's going to, the revolutionary changes that's going to,
or the demise of many jobs.
The demise of many jobs. But what can't be replaced is the human element in the customer experience. And they call it artificial information, artificial knowledge, but there's no such thing as artificial wisdom. And that's what we have to bring. So that's why that application aspect, to me, is the most critical aspect going forward.
And you're making the case, wisely so, that residential universities like High Point University will always be in business. And here's why. You just made the point that you can go online and do all the stuff you want. You can read all the books. You can watch all the videos. But the truth is that you have to have the experience of maturation. So a 17, 18-year-old coming out of high school, going to college, is not just about the acquisition of knowledge. It's about, acquisition of knowledge. It's about growth in wisdom. But it's mostly about the maturation, the evolutionary process of being a high school kid and becoming a wiser, smarter person who's positioning himself or herself in a way that other people are willing to exchange legal tender and other resources for what they know and what they can do. And the question is, how do we get there? How do we produce in universities today people who not only have the product, the knowledge, but the product of the product, the application of the knowledge. Not only application of knowledge, but application of knowledge in a way that is consistent with the demands of the marketplace and the demands of a global marketplace, an international marketplace. As you know, on this campus, we have Cottrell Center, which does exactly what you're talking about. That's a sales center, entrepreneurship center, internship center, career services center. Almost 100% of our students, when they graduate, they're going to get a job or go to college of their own choice for graduate work. And the 1 or 2% who don't do that, they take a year off, or they have family issues that they have to deal with, or they start their own business. And so we're very proud on this campus that we adhere, listen, learn from experts like you, and we apply it every day in measurable places. And that's why, frankly, Scott, HPU University is succeeding so much. It's not that we're geniuses. It's rather that we are producing the kinds of elements, the kind of vehicles that allow an individual to become better prepared for the world. Hence, Premier Life Skills School. Let me ask you this question. You just came back from Australia. You go to Australia a lot. You're a resident consultant for Volkswagen internationally, and you don't go back time and again unless you're doing something really substantive and unless they're getting some real serious value from you. What do you tell an audience like that?
The world has changed, and the challenge of the future is changing the way that you think. It's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, the world is changing, and we can list infinite number of ways that it is. The harder thing is to change how we think. Let me give you a quick example. I tell them to stop thinking about sales, but to start thinking about subscription. The world is moving from a sales model to a subscription model. By that I mean, here's a specific example. They think, I'm going to sell you this car. How are you going to finance it? A lease? That's one way. I'll close that sale on the car. Now, I'll put you in the tickler, and your car is due in 3 years, the lease is due. I'll call you in 3 years and try to sell you another car. What if you changed your way of thinking that the payment is a monthly subscription? And when you're 2.5 years out, I'm going to call you. I'm going to be in touch with you that entire time. I will make the arrangements in the service department for you. And in 2.5 years, I'll go, hey, Nito, guess what? We're not changing your monthly payment. I'm going to bring a new car out for you. I'll take yours, and we're just going to bring you the new version of the car I know you already love. So it's a subscription. Porsche is doing this in Atlanta right now. For a specific amount a month, you can drive whatever Porsche that you want to drive. Oh, you got a family coming? Just bring the one you're driving in, drive our SUV off. But then when the family leaves, drop it back off, pick up your 911 and drive it. They're thinking in terms of that. But to be successful, you have to change how you think. And that is what is so challenging, because it's so easy to continue to work harder on the old wrong plan. And I see so many organizations doing that. So what we try to do is to work through a number of steps, a number of ways, that being one. But I see that in every organization. How do we think of the world that we live in from a subscription model? If a university thinks that way, how do we want you to continue to subscribe to High Point? Then not only do we have students more engaged through the years that they're here, but then they become more engaged as alumni as well. That subscription to your university doesn't end. Those are some of the ways that we're trying to help organizations think about how the future is going to change. The other thing is, if it's a subscription model, that means that every month I'd better be current. It means that every month I'd better be bringing you the best ideas, and the best technology, and the best deals, so that you want to continue to be engaged with who and what we are.
But it also means that the equity in your business is worth more, because the predictive subscription value is therefore an asset on your balance sheet. It also means that you can have a predictive model of revenues. It also means you have more resources to do R&D. I mean,
it goes on and on. Yes, absolutely.
I get the sustainability and the continuity factor.
Absolutely. Yeah, because so many are worried about, oh, well, for example, in the automotive industry, what happens when electric cars come? Oh my gosh, we're blowing everything up. But if I think it in terms of a subscription, I just continue to update you on the latest, so it helps. To your point, it makes us encouraged to fund R&D rather than just try to protect our current place in the market.
So on this campus, we had our students, our staff, our faculty got to listen to Dr. Carol Dweck, who's a professor at Stanford University, who wrote the book Mindset, who taught us all the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And in a sense, that's what you're talking about, that some individuals and therefore some companies have a fixed mindset. This is the way we've always done it, we've been good at it, we're not changing it, blah, blah, blah. Others say, no, the world is my stage, and I'm in a constant process of renewal, and I will listen to your ideas, even though they may be very different than mine, and maybe the best ideas will win, maybe we'll stimulate our thinking back and forth. Again, that's what we try to do on this campus every single day, that I come out of business, obviously, many years of business. Faculty had to adjust to a guy like me. I had to adjust to learned people like them. But the combination is phenomenal. If you take that recipe and say, if I were putting a committee together or a board together, as you know, I'm on a number of corporate boards. We always say in the corporate boards, what skill sets are we missing? What else do we need around the table so when we have dialogue, we have a complete picture. We don't leave out an important ingredient in this discussion. So this is all fascinating stuff. The world has to change for lots of reasons. As you know, the co-founder of Netflix is our entrepreneur in residence. He comes here every semester, talks to our students. He tells story after story after story about how the evolution of Netflix, how they had to think differently, how they had to compete differently. In fact, he tells a story about how they almost ran out of money and they went to Blockbuster and they said, buy 50% of our company for $50 million. They desperately needed some cash. And the Blockbuster people, Wayne Huizinga is a guy I knew, he just passed away a year ago. They laughed at him. And they said, what, $50 million for that Netflix thing? Today, Netflix got a market cap of $150 billion, and Blockbuster is nowhere to be found. So this illustrates what you are talking about. So your most recent book is called Iconic.
And by the way, to piggyback on what you're saying, that's one of the points of the book Iconic, too, is Netflix also changed how they viewed themselves, right? As opposed to being a distributor of other people's content. Now let's change and create our own content so that we can control and manage and use the data of what our viewers want to see. So they continue to model that behavior, which is a challenge for so many organizations. They get it right once, and then they try to do everything they can to protect the old model without continuing to enhance it.
So I mean, Scott, you know many people, as I know many people. I have a lot of friends who started a company, grew it, sold it for mega bucks, tried to do something again and again, and couldn't do it. Because they were trying to apply the same fundamentals and principles they used before. And while that's wise to an extent, that may be the Mona Lisa of what you know, but the frame around the Mona Lisa has to be changed and adapted to the times.
Absolutely.
Why did you call it Iconic?
Fairmont Hotels is a great client of ours, and they went through those 4 cornerstones of distinction that we talked about, particularly one of their properties in...
Let me see if I can remember. Clarity, creativity, communication, and customer experience focus.
You get an A on the exam, Dr.
Okay, can I get some of the royalties on the book?
Well, we could, how many do you want to buy to get some, right? But they came to me and they said, we did this, and our guest room count is up, and our profitability is up, and all the things that you wanted us to achieve is that. So now what do we do? What comes next? And it occurred to me I'd written a book on how to create distinction, but not how
Which
to...
is a great book.
Thank you.
That book I read twice.
I appreciate
it's loaded with content.
They said, now what do we do? Because I'd written a book on how to create it, but not how to keep it. Or to regain it, if something had happened and you were trying to get back to that area. It also occurred to me that there are some businesses that are distinctive, they stand out in their industry. There are others that are iconic. They transcend. Netflix, for example, isn't just a distinctive in the field of entertainment. They're iconic. They are a model that if I have a machine shop, I could take a look at that and say, wow, how do I become the Netflix or the Starbucks or that?
So how does a company become iconic?
Well, you transcend your industry.
Is it a conscious effort, or is it a byproduct of a whole series of things that happen?
Yes.
Yes, it's all of the above.
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
It is part of what I've found in researching iconic companies was that their core values and principles were so well defined and so extraordinary that it enabled them to be flexible. Now, it sounds like an oxymoron, but if you're Netflix and you're saying our core principle is to entertain you in anywhere you are in any way we can, right? It started, how did they do it in the old days? The DVD got mailed to you. Then how did we do it? Well, we started streaming other people. Now how do we do it? We make it available on phones and tab. The core principle is there, but the expansion of that becomes iconic. So what we found in this was that there were 5 factors, and a couple of them that we found, the research really surprised me. Customers judge us based on 2 factors and 2 factors alone: promise and performance. What have I said to you that I'm going to do? And then you're going to evaluate me on how I execute based upon the promise I have made. Interesting research out of the University of California, San Diego says that the old line about under-promise and over-deliver is now perceived by customers as manipulative. Iconic companies do what they say they will do when they said they would do it. That's it. That makes us stand out in the marketplace. Now, there's obviously more than that, but the primary thing is that we found is that they executed. Now, disruptors advance the promise and accelerate the performance. Quick example there. Uber now has Uber Eats. Right? It used to be, we'll take you where you want to go.
Yes.
Now we'll go get the meal and
to
bring it to you. They are pioneering now in some communities Uber Health, where we work with doctors, because one of the challenges in healthcare for senior citizens is simply getting to the clinic, the access to it. So now they're working with health insurance companies, they're working with clinics where they will come pick up the patient, they will deliver the patient, they will take the patient back. They're developing a system where you could use a flip phone, because they know many senior citizens don't use the smartphones and don't use the apps. So what they're continuing to do is to advance the promise and accelerate the performance.
Yes.
And that is how they sustain and reinvent themselves.
And to do that, you have to be very adaptive.
Yeah.
You have to be very nimble.
Exactly.
And I think you have to have a degree of courage, because there is trial and error in that process.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. One of the really interesting facts is that every iconic leader I talked with, every iconic organization, and this was the first of the principles, they did what we call play offense. Now, as a sports fan, I always heard that defense wins championships, right? The better defense. Absolutely not true when you look at the statistics. Even in sports, the better offensive team has won 38 of 53 Super Bowl games, right? It's it's playing the game your way.
Yeah.
And not that you don't appreciate the competition, and not that you don't appreciate your tradition as an organization, but you have to develop your game plan that you execute with courage, with creativity, and say, this is where we're going. Which in turn gets back to what you were talking about earlier. It's the leader that has not just the data and the information and the knowledge, but the emotional ability to lead people to execute the game plan that she desires.
Yes.
That is absolutely essential to make this work.
So Scott, when an organization works towards becoming iconic, do you, in the process, consciously or subconsciously, focus on the entirety of the universe of your customers or prospects? Or do you, by default, end up appealing to a nucleus of that group, and you end up upsetting others or not doing business with others? Do you see what I'm asking?
No, exactly. I think that's one of the hardest principles for leaders to understand. Our friend Ken Blanchard wrote about raving fans, but the other side of that coin is, to create raving fans, you have to be willing to create raving enemies. to have someone feel so passionately about you that they're a raving fan also means you can't be all things to all people.
Yes.
And the future, as I see it, is going to be in organizations that have these raving fans, that you appeal to that group that will, well, there's some research about millennials that I think most people would find fascinating. They say, oh, millennials aren't loyal. Millennials are extraordinarily loyal, provided there is a reason to be. It's that they feel that most organizations have not given them a reason to be loyal.
As in a social issue, or as in life-work balance, or as in what?
All the above. Millennials are loyal to organizations that have social commitments, social contracts about, we stand for something more than just the bottom line. They are loyal to organizations that take care of them. They feel that customer service and the customer experience is so bad, why would I be loyal to an organization? What they're looking for is what I call reciprocal loyalty. In other words, I haven't seen today's newspaper, but I'll promise you there's a full-page ad from a mobile phone company promising a new customer a better deal than what I've been paying on the last couple of years. Why would I be loyal to them when they've publicly shown that their loyalty is to acquisition, not retention?
Yes.
So that turns millennials off. Why would I be loyal to organizations that don't express loyalty to me? And I think there's a world of opportunity out there for organizations that provide reasons for them to be loyal. And there's the other thing. We think about the millennials, and we use that almost as a cliche, but the oldest millennial is 36 years old, 37 years old. I mean, we have a candidate for president in the Democratic Party that's 37, that's a millennial, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. So it's not that, oh, they're coming. It's that it's it. It's here, right?
Yeah, we're here. What is the most important? Give me 10 words that you believe are the most important things you said in this book.
If organizations that are iconic find ways to serve customers in such a compelling manner, it ensures repeat and referral business.
That's 16 words, but you're forgiven. All right, so you also wrote a book that Taxi Terry wouldn't make any sense to the one looking at until you get in the book and you understand what Taxi Terry is. What is Taxi Terry?
Taxi Terry is a cab driver in Jacksonville, Florida that gave me the ultimate customer experience. And the great part of the story is that Uber is disrupting the industry, but they are not disrupting Taxi Terry for this reason. He provides solutions, not rides.
Solutions, not rides. And you speak of an example of that when you say you went back to I can't remember Amelia Island, I think it was, and you called the company and you insisted on Terry being the guy who's going to take you to Amelia Island, and you and Terry went on into a conversation where he told you that since he's seen you, he expanded his business. He now has a larger opportunity, more drivers, and so on. And then he surprised you by saying that he even was the guy picked to drive
President Bill Clinton, former President Clinton. Yeah.
And you talk in this book about the 7 tenets of customer service.
I got to tell you real quick. When Terry picked me up for the first time, the first thing he did was jump out of the car. I'm just standing at the airport. He jumps out of the car, points at me, and says, "Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?" Wow. And it was. So then we meet years later, and I'm talking to him about this. I said, "My gosh, Terry, what did you say to Bill Clinton?" "You ready for the best limo ride of your life?" What else would I say? And he delivers it. That's promise and performance. Yeah.
So you talk about the 7 tenets here of customer service. You say, set high expectations and then exceed them. Delivering what helps the customer helps you. Customers are people, so personalize their experience. Think logically and then act creatively and consistently. Make the customer the star of the show. Help your customers come back for more. Creating joy for your customer will make your work and life more joyful. Okay, you know, Scott, that I'm chairman of a company called Great Harvest Bread Company. And Great Harvest, in many ways, has done and does what you're talking about. So when we bought the company, I can remember thinking to myself, why in the world would I want to be involved in a bread company, in a bakery, a chain of stores? And then I got to know this company. And I realized the huge difference between brand awareness. For example, I know Pepsi and I know Coca-Cola, but I prefer Coca-Cola over Pepsi for whatever reason. The difference between brand awareness and brand advocacy, which is what you talk about when you say you acquire the customer, but you retain the customer. You obtain and retain, you said. And then when that retained customer client becomes your friend and advocates you and your service to other people, you've got a built-in machine to advertise who you are, what you do. It's exactly what's happening at HPU University. And consider what's happened here. We started with 1,450 students just 12 years ago. We went through 6 years of the most disrupted economic times, the last 85 years of America's history, and called the Great Recession. And yet today we have 5,300 students, so we're thriving. We've invested $2 billion in this institution, and people are amazed. In the first 5 or 6 years, exactly what you said happened. People were critical. People said, that's not going to work. That's going to fall apart. Now you say, well, the proof is in the pudding. Well, what did we really do? What happened is we delivered, and the parents loved it so much. The students are still young. They haven't had a chance to become alumni of great distinction in the marketplace, at least not the last a dozen years. But the parents advocated. And we couldn't buy that kind of advertising. It's so valuable when you get somebody to say, this is a good book, this is a great movie, this is a wonderful pizza, this is a great hotel. People believe it. And they act on it, and all of a sudden magic takes place.
I had a chance to spend some time with Jim Cameron, who was the director of the two biggest movies, box office hits, Titanic and Avatar. And I said, every director wants to direct a successful movie, but why have you directed the two most successful in history? And he said, the key is, when you saw Titanic, not only did you come back to the theater and see it again, you brought a friend with you.
That's it.
That's it. So what happens at High Point University? The students go back home, and every, if a high school senior, they have friends that are juniors and sophomores. Now they're a college freshman, but their friends are still in high school. What do? They go back and they tell the High Point story. Tammy, my wife, and I are walking in Santa Monica over the summer, and we see two younger girls, younger women, and what we assumed was her mother, and the one had on a High Point sweatshirt right downtown Santa Monica. And I just said, hey, love High Point. We got a 5-minute speech on how great High Point is, and how great everything is. They talked about you, they talked about the institution. I said, oh, I know him. And they were like, yeah, sure. And I wanted to so, but I walked away, and Tammy and I were thinking, that's this.
If you have enough of those people doing that,
you build marketing mass momentum. And as you have said, as I said earlier, I quoted you, I'll quote you again. There are no secrets to success, you once said. There are only systems.
Only systems.
And you have developed that system here, and the output of that system not only is the referral, but we also walked away going, man, would we love to hire that young lady? What a pro.
That's the key.
That's the essence.
That's the key. If we can prepare them to position themselves as men and women who render value, who interpret value, who execute on value, then it's a win-win-win situation. In the time we have left over, this is fascinating. We could talk, you and I can talk about a week about all these issues, and our viewers love to hear these kind of concepts and ideas, because you're speaking about practical, pragmatic applications, not mere theory. It's real. It's what happens in the marketplace. And who among us doesn't want to be successful? Whether we're running a small store at the corner of 2 streets in a small town, whether we're running a Fortune 500 company, the principles are the same. You always have the 3 Ps, right? The product, the process, the person, the people. And you're talking about how the people drive the process and therefore create a product that people want. But I want to talk about you before we end our time here on this program. You were born in Indiana. You were a big shot with farmers.
FFA, Future Farmers of America.
And you continued to go back and speak at some of their large events. You won some of their biggest awards. You got into radio, and then what?
And television, but because of my work with FFA, I took 2 years off of college and I traveled and spoke as the state president in Indiana, as a national as well officer, which means that you're in front of students doing high school assemblies and student programs, but you're also doing the parent member banquets where the mom and dad are in the audience. So after my speech, someone's mom would come up and say, hey, I'm the president of the local bank. I know my tellers would love to hear that talk. Could you come back and give that?
Yeah.
So that's how I kept getting so many invitations that I knew it was something that I wanted to pursue. I worked for my alma mater for a couple of years as their director of annual fund and public affairs. But I just kept getting so many invitations to speak. The challenge was, as you know, I was a good speaker that spoke about everything. And I went through a personal tragedy that kind of took me out of the business for a while. And when I got back in, I thought, how in the world do I rebuild this? How do I get, because my career was good, but it wasn't great, and it wasn't as fulfilling, certainly, as I'd hoped it would be. And that's where the whole search on distinction started.
Yeah.
I was looking for how could I make my speaking business stand out, and I couldn't find resources that would help me do that. And so that was the blinding flash, the obvious. If I, as a small business person, am looking for this, what are the chances that others are as well?
Yeah. How many years have you been speaking? 25?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, professionally.
I went full-time in the speaking business in 1981.
Oh, so that's 19 plus, I think about 38 years. So you've been lying about your age then. You must be 82, 83.
Yes, I'm holding up well
so
for 95,
that's the secret of
right?
the beard, huh? Just takes away 10 years. Scott, to be in this business so long, one must possess and demonstrate continually relevance.
Thank you.
How have you done that?
I love learning. I love learning. I love continuing to think about how what I've just learned can be applied in a practical manner so that I can communicate it in a way that people go, oh, I could do that. So many times I think we talk about how the world has changed, but we don't bridge the gap into this means that you could do this, or this means you as a CEO need to be considering this. That's it. The other thing is I have a couple, I call them reverse mentors. Typically the mentor was the older, wise sage that would help you. I think it's important, and you get that here at the university in volume. I have 3 young people, late 20s, early 30s, that are almost mentoring me on what the mindset is of a younger generation and how they actually use the tools out there. And I find it thrilling.
So I'm going to ask you a serious questions, just short answers. Hobbies?
Oh, I love golf. I'm terrible at it, but for me, reading and learning and studying, I consider as a hobby. I absolutely love it.
How do you overcome jet lag?
If you find out the secret, let me know. You set your watch to where you're going.
Yeah.
Just try to change your mindset.
Try to keep, Are you working on another book?
Yeah, I am.
What is it about?
It's taking distinction. The books that I have written are books that CEOs and managers read. I have yet to write that book that the bank would give to every teller. And so the new book basically is titled, Why You?
Good.
We think about distinction. Distinction is how do we stand out so that we get chosen? I spent the last 12 years studying what's the process of being selected. A coaching client of mine is Dr. Sheena Agnar at Columbia University, who is supposedly the world's leading expert on choice. But I'm trying to take that a different direction in that it's not just why would a customer choose you, it's why would you choose a particular college, or why would that college choose you? If there's someone in a relationship that I want to have, why would they pick me because we're not chosen. We're chosen instead of the myriad of other options that are available, right? So why would you be the best choice?
So the question I ask like that, I ask the question, why should someone do business with you, given choices? And the more important question is, how easily can someone else imitate what you do? Because the easier it is to imitate what you do, less valuable you become by definition.
Right.
All right, a pet peeve?
Oh, where do you want to
Just
start?
give me one.
Oh, how about rudeness on airplanes?
Yeah, oh
is
my
a
goodness.
pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. Unfortunately, civility
Yes.
is something we all aspire to experience every day.
Absolutely.
Something I'm proud of on this campus. You know, I tell people you can have your own mind, you can have your own ideas, we can differ about all kinds of philosophies, but let's do it in a civil manner.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, that's what being a lady or a gentleman is all about in relationships. When you speak to young people, as you are going to be doing today with our students, what are the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you give them that can propel them forward, given that they are 19, 18, 20, 21? What is it you say? You say, do these 3 things if you want to enjoy success and have a life filled with significance. What is it? What are those things?
One is analyze what you've done right, because the basic principles that got you here at High Point, the basic principles that let you choose this as your future, and that High Point choose you as well, those basic principles are going to help you in everything for the rest of your life. So what are you doing from a self-assessment standpoint? What have you done right? Secondly, what have you done incorrectly? What do you need to fix? Because there's no better time in your life than right now to use this as your laboratory of what you fixed. Number 3 is where you're going. The whole process of, I tell the story about how Arnold Schwarzenegger showed me his goals that he wrote when he was 15 years old, and not that your goals don't change, not that you may not adapt them as you learn more and as you experience more, but they're, as corny as it sounds and as much as has been said, you know, I didn't get on the plane yesterday and the pilot say, hey, where y'all want to go?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, there's a direction. And so is your direction precise enough that will help you then take what you need to do and take what you've already done and apply that to get you to where you want to go?
And that's why you're here. And that's why we bring all these experts and residents at High Point. That's what we do. We invest enormous resources in ensuring that our students have the capacity to make those decisions based on reality and based on positive expectations. You know, I've asked that question of a lot of people. I've asked it of Colin Powell. He said, among his answers, be nice to people, every person. I've asked it to Condoleezza Rice. She said, you know, she grew up in the most segregated times of Birmingham, Alabama, when only become a classical pianist, the youngest woman to ever become the provost, the only woman and youngest woman, and the only African-American woman to become the provost at Stanford University, not to mention Secretary of State and National Board of Advisors and so on. And she said, you know, grit. You know, just know that not everyone's going to like you, but God created you for a purpose. You're to be extraordinary. You know, that's, you know, I've asked it of the co-founder of Apple Computer. Right. You know, how did you even survive with a guy like Steve Jobs, who's the epitome of energy and determination and so on? Then he said, you know, I focused on what I'm good at, just what you said, your first point. You know, I've asked it of many CEOs. Yes. How do you survive when you run a big public company, 50,000 employees? How do you create culture, for example? And they always said, you know, it's find what it is that you believe in, repeat it often, so it becomes part of the genre, part of the very critical mass of this humanity.
Quick story, real quick. When I was in FFA, 22 years old, we were thanking our sponsors. I had a personal audience for a half an hour with the chairman of General Motors, just the two of us. And so I'm thinking, what in the world do I ask him? So here was the question I came up with, and that is, his name was Thomas Murphy. And I said, well, Mr. Murphy, GM probably hired 1,000 people the same month they hired you. Of all these people, how did you attain this? And he said, you know, it's the strangest thing. He said, I had this idea in my very first low-level job. I couldn't get promoted unless someone could take my place. So I decided to invest all my time in building my people, because if I did that, then I became very easy to promote because I had a great team, and I continued to do that throughout my career. So when it came down to the final two, who are we going to pick to be chairman, he said I had a reservoir of goodwill internally that rooted for me to be the one. And I learned so much from that, because we see so many leaders, and that was a message I was going to share today with the students as well. We see so many leaders that want to protect their turf. His was, let's build everyone up. So our organization, our department, our group functions better. But it was also the key to him becoming the chairman of what at that time was the most powerful company in the world.
The foundational tenet of being a great leader is not only create capacity in yourself, but create capacity in your team, right? Which is what you're doing, Scott, as you speak to audiences on the platforms of America and the world, as you're doing through the written word and the recorded word that you've done so well over these years, as you're doing as you deliver relevance to audiences everywhere, including students at HPU University. I'm delighted that you're here, and we need to have another conversation like this when you do your next book, Why You, because that's a fascinating title, and I'll bet the content will be very meaningful and very useful. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be on our campus, and thank you for allowing me to dig in your mind a little more.
It's been a privilege, Nito.
Thank you, Scott. Pleasure to have you here.
As always, thank you.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.